the International Soccer Preview. We are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 20, the 2023 African Cup. This episode is part 2 on the players of Nigeria, the final selections. Here we go. Hello, we are back to part 2 of our mediacast on the players of the 2023 African Cup. The final roster is released and we are looking at Nigeria's selections. In part 1, we compiled a list of players and their likelihood of reaching the final squad. The link to that is available in the show notes, and that was based mostly on their participation over the past 2 years, but we did consider a few other factors as well. Today, we'll review that list now that the final squads have been published. And we promise to point out any surprises, so any notable non-selections, surprise inclusions, and new players. And we also said we would update any injuries. So we'll do all of those things as we go through the list again. We also released a spotlight review, a not-so-serious prediction of the starters. We released that as a short. And we'll review the list. We'll review that list at the end here. So let's jump right in and begin with a little information on the squad and the games. So teams were allowed to bring 27 players to the tournament. That was a decision actually made in mid-December to raise it from 23 to 27. But in the case of Nigeria, they have only brought 25 players. Nigeria selected a preliminary squad of 41 players, so they had to cut 16 of those to create the final squad. So a few of those players were on our list, and a few of them were not on our list, some of them never having played for the squad before. So we'll really only be mentioning the preliminary squad players that either made it to the final squad or who were on our list in the first place. Okay, in terms of games, we did the part 1 after they had played their 2 World Cup qualifiers in November. So that gave us some insight as to who would be selected and started. We were hoping as a pre-tournament friendly would give us further insight, especially as to the starters. But it turns out that they used mostly almost like a B team in that game, maybe giving some of the bench players a bit of field time. There were a couple of players we think who were starters, will be starters, were used, but for the most part, they were players that we think will be more bench players. So, but it could indicate a surprise, but we don't think so. Okay, let's move on then to the main duty of this podcast, and we look at the manager, and it's a bit of confusion about the manager. We read one report saying that Jose Pizarro was fired on December 9th, and that interim manager Augustine Equivoen would come in and lead the squad through the cup. That would be his 5th go at being a manager, but I never actually saw verification of that, and he's still listed, Jose Pizarro is still listed as the manager, so maybe it was a bit of a hoax. Anyway, Jose Pizarro, according to our best information, is still the manager, and so we highlight him in green. Sorry, I'm just finding my spot on the graphics here, or on in my information. We highlight him in green so as to indicate that he has been selected for the squad, as it were. So Jose Pizarro leading them through the cup. Goalkeepers, let's look at what we have on the list here. So we put Francis Uzoho as a definite candidate, and we had 4 possible candidates, none in the likely category, but 4 in the possible category. So Maduka Okoye, Ojo Olorunleke, Amas Obasogi, and Adebayo Adele. All of those players on our list as possible candidates. Well, Francis Uzuho was selected for the squad, so the definite candidate made it. However, only one of the four possible candidates made it to the final squad there, and that was Ojo Olorunleke. Sorry, the two bottom ones, Amas Obasogi and Adebayo Adele, made it to the preliminary squad, but were not selected for the final squad. And Maduka Okoye, not even selected to the preliminary squad. Instead, there is a new candidate that was added to the squad, and that is Stanley Nwabali. So that was definitely a bit of a surprise. Stanley Nwabali is 27 years old, and he actually had two appearances for Nigeria in 2021. That was a start in a friendly. Actually, that was his only appearance. I'm mixing him up with someone else. A start in a friendly in July 2021, and then he was off the squad until he was named to the preliminary squad, and even more surprisingly, named to the final squad. But he did start in the warm-up game to earn his second cap. So Stanley Nwabali, probably on the bench there, but a surprising selection for the squad. Okay, that is goalkeepers. Let's move on to defenders. Central defenders, we had a definite candidate in Semi Ajayi, and two possible candidates, Calvin Bassey and Kenneth Omaru. And then we had, sorry, I think I said possible there. Those were likely candidates, Bassey and Omaru. Three possible candidates in Kevin Akpoguma and William Troost Ekong and Jordan Tornariga. Let's see. And we did actually put on the list a player who seemed to be off the squad. That was Leon Balogun. Let's see who made it. Semi Ajayi, our definite candidate, was selected, as were our two likely candidates, Calvin Bassey and Kenneth Omaru. Among the possible candidates, William Troost Ekong was selected. Kevin Akpoguma was selected for the preliminary squad, but not the final squad. And the same is true of Jordan Tornariga. So both of those, just the preliminary squad. Leon Balogun, well, we were right to consider him off the squad because he wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad there. Last appeared in June 2022. Okay, let's move on now to left backs, and we had no definite or likely candidates, but we did have two possible candidates, Zaidu Sanusi and Bruno Onyemaechi. We also had a possible but unlikely candidate in Jamilu Collins. And again, if you want to know why we put the players where we did, again, it's basically based on their participation over the last 2 years, and we talked about that in part one. Anyway, Zaidu Sanusi, the possible candidate, was selected, and the other possible candidate too, Bruno Onyemaechi, also selected for the squad. Collins Jamilu, selected for the preliminary squad, kind of came in out of the cold there, but not selected for the final squad. Okay, right backs, we have two likely candidates in Ola Aina and in Bright Osei Samuel. And then two possible candidates in Chidozie Awezium and Tyrone Ebuhi. Ola Anya, the first likely candidate there, was selected, and Bright Osei Samuel also selected. And the first of our possible candidates, Chidozie Awezium, selected. Tyrone Abuihi made it to the preliminary squad, but not the didn't survive the final cut. So 3 right backs coming to the tournament, and we move on to the midfield and to players coded as defensive midfielders. So we have as a possible candidate Wilfred Ndidi, and also possible Rafael Onyedika. And I think that was it. But we did put a player who seemed to be off the squad on the list for some reason. That was Peter Etibo. I don't know why we put him on the list, because he wasn't selected for the previous cup. Anyway, didn't make the preliminary squad even here. Let's go back to the main candidate. Wilfred Ndidi was selected. However, he withdrew due to injury about a week ago, January 3rd, and he was replaced by Al Hassan Youssef, who we'll meet shortly. So that's a big loss to them, Wilfred Ndidi. And the other possible candidate, Rafael Onyedika, was selected for the squad. Okay, for central midfielders, we had Alex Iwobi. Actually, he's coded as an attacking midfielder and secondarily as a central midfielder, but he's played in this position more for Nigeria. So we had him as a definite candidate, Alex Iwobi, as well as Joe Aribo, both of them definite candidates. Likely candidate, Frank Onyeka. And then besides them, just one possible candidate in Fizeo Delibashiru. Alex Iwobi, the first definite candidate, and Joe Aribo, both of them selected for the squad. Frank Onyeka also selected, and the possible candidate, Delibashiru, selected for the preliminary squad, but not making the final cut there. Left and right midfielders, well, this coding is kind of out of fashion, and Nigeria has no players coded as left and right midfielders. Usually it's central midfielders covering those positions. So we move on upfield to the upper left quadrant of the field, which could be left winger, could be left attacking midfielder, or even left forward, depending on the formation that they use. So we just think of it as the upper left quadrant of the field. We have Moses Simon, also coded as an attacking midfielder, but playing in this position over the past period, mostly playing over the past period. We have Moses Simon as a definite candidate. Same with Ademola Lookman, who's coded as a secondary striker, but was over here too. We had a possible candidate, Ahmed Musa, also playing out of position on the left wing, although a couple of my sources do code him as a left winger, Ahmed Musa. And yeah, that was all the candidates we had, and all 3 of them made it. So Moses Simon, Ademola Lookman, and Ahmed Musa. So that's a pretty powerful group of players vying for that position. Of course, they all do play other positions as well. Okay, we move to right wingers, and we have Samuel Chukwueze as a likely candidate, and then a possible candidate in Nathan Tella. And we did put Emmanuel Dennis as a player seemingly off the squad. And we must have known something, actually, because he was selected for the preliminary squad. We'll come back to that, though, and start at the top. The likely candidate, Samuel Chukwueze, selected. Nathan Tella, the possible candidate, selected for the preliminary squad, but not for the final squad. And same with Dennis Emmanuel. So even though he last played for the team in November 2022, um, uh, he was called up to the preliminary squad, but didn't make the final cut. So, okay, that is right wingers, and we move to forwards, beginning with attacking midfielders. We moved Victor Osimhen to this category, did we? No, we did not. Oh, there are no attacking midfielders for Nigeria. Actually, we moved a couple of them over to the left wing because they were playing in that position more. And I made a note here that they haven't used a formation with an attacking midfielder much. The two times they did use it, it was Iheanacho, who we're going to meet right away here. So let's go actually to forwards. We have 4 forwards at the likely level here. The first one is Victor Osimhen. Secondly, Terran Moffi. Thirdly, Kelechi Iheanacho. And fourthly, Umar Sadiq. We also have 2 possible candidates, Victor Boniface and Taiwo Awoniyi. So let's go back and see who made it. Actually, it gets a little complex here. Victor Osimhen was selected for the squad, so that's simple enough. I'm going to just leave Terran Moffi for the time being and say Kelechi Iheanacho was also selected for the squad. And so was our possible candidate, Victor Boniface. Now, let's go back and see Umar Sadiq, the third of the likely candidates, was selected. However, he sustained an injury on January 12th, and he got injured and replaced. So we're going to put him on the injured list, and the replacement for him was a player who we had at the possible but unlikely level, but didn't introduce because he had missed the last 6 matches. So it was Paul Onuachu. So Paul Onuachu had been selected for the preliminary squad and has come in now to replace Umar Sadiq, and so he is selected to the squad. A similar situation with Victor Boniface. Victor Boniface withdrew from the squad and on January 9th. And so we have to move him also to the injured list. And in that case, it was Terran Moffi who was selected. So we were surprised initially when Terran Moffi was not selected for the squad. We had him as a likely candidate, but he only made the preliminary squad. But then with Boniface's injury, he comes back to replace him, and so he will be on the squad too. So quite complex there at the upper end, and I don't think I updated Taiwo Awoniyi. He wasn't selected even for the preliminary squad there. Okay, well, we navigated that, and I do realize I forgot one thing. So we're going to go back to the central midfield to talk about Wilfred Ndidi's replacement. So Wilfred Ndidi, coded as a defensive midfielder. There's not a lot of difference between the defensive and central midfielders. They often kind of blend into each other. His replacement is a central midfielder, and it is a new candidate. It's Alisson Yusuf Abdullahi, named to the squad, and he was a new candidate. We didn't have him on the list, and in fact he had never appeared for the Nigerian squad. His only appearance now is in the warm-up game just before the tournament here. So he plays for Royal Antwerp in Belgium and was with Göteborg in Sweden before that. He's 23 years old, and as I said, his first cap just January of this year. So there we have it. That completes our list, and we move on to the Spotlight Review. And really, we're just going to repeat what we said, because the January game didn't give us any insight into the starters there. And so we're just going to, our thinking hasn't had any reason to change. So on Nigeria, it's mostly definite or decisions that we're confident about. So goalkeeper Francis Uzohu, we're confident will be the starter. I should also mention the manager as well, Jose Pizarro. We don't think he'll be dismissed at this point, although there was some threat of it. Anyway, in central defence, we think Semi Ajayi is a definite starter, and we're not sure about his partner there, but we think Calvin Bassey has the most chance of starting beside him. None of those players I've mentioned, the keeper or the central defender, were starters in the recent cup, and that's going to continue all the way up until the left wing. Left back, we didn't have any candidate there, so we weren't sure, but right back, we were confident Ola Aina would be the starter. In the central midfield, we were confident only enough to put one candidate there, Alex Iwobi, but we couldn't. We didn't think anyone else was a strong enough candidate to nominate as a starter. Moses Simon and Samuel Chukwueze, we do consider as starters on the left wing and the right wing. We're confident about both of those. And in their cases, they both did start the pre-tournament friendly there. So they were the only players we consider starters who actually did start. We also think Victor Osimhen will be the starting forward. So we had him, like most of the players here, in green on the list, which means that we're confident about it. But he didn't start the game. Actually, Umar Sadiq started the friendly and got injured and is now off the squad. So certainly he won't be the starter. Anyway, that brings us to the end of part 2. So in part 1, we compiled a list of candidates based on their likelihood of reaching the squad, and then in part 2, we looked at the final roster and went through to see who had and who hadn't made it. So we hope that familiarizing yourself with the teams and players through our series here enriches your enjoyment of the cup. We would like to thank Pixabay and Alexei Ivanov of Mappa Music for the wonderful background music accompanying this mediacast.